Hey guys, Brian here. Welcome back. Today we are revisiting the Costa Henry M-Lok handguard and modular rail system by Range of Point Precision and Chris Costa. And this is the leveling video for how to properly level the gators with your receiver rail. If you haven't seen the overview video, check here or in the description, there's a link for it. And that will show you what this system is capable of. This one is just for you guys that have extreme OCD and need everything just perfectly level. Or if you're running a clip-on thermal and you want that, 32nd or 64th of an inch difference, then this is for you guys. So to get started out, the reason this is a modular system is because not all barrels and receivers are mated perfectly. There are a wide variety of tolerances throughout the industry. And if you've changed out buttstocks, you've probably seen that, where some buttstocks will slip right on, doesn't matter the brand of gun or buttstock, and others you nearly have to beat on with a mallet. That's because of the tolerance variances of who was building it that day and how the machinery was doing. If the machinery is super sharp, it's going to make a beautiful crisp cut. If the machinery is getting dull, things aren't going to be working out so well. And it's the exact same when it comes to barrels and receivers. I have a gun on the wall behind me that droops 54 thousandths of an inch in an 8-inch span, and that is not going to be a perfect host when it comes to mounting a receiver rail to the barrel and keeping everything dead flat and true. Because if that barrel is drooping and I mount a rail to the receiver that also ties into the barrel, I'm going to have to pull that receiver rail down to the barrel and make it made up, which is going to flex the barrel one way or another and take it out of what its naturally true is. So by this being a modular system and you having individual rails that go on the barrel and the receiver, this allows you to keep this separate. Now, this is going to give you better accuracy as opposed to doing a solid rail, but you also have to keep in mind you can't bridge these two rails with one optic mount or an optic with two rings. If you do that, you are pretty much making it a solid rail. So keep that in mind. All that being said, today we're going to be talking about leveling. And it seems like it might be a difficult process, but it's really not. First and foremost, your receiver is a standard. This is what you're going to go by because this is what you're wanting to true to. This is not adjustable. So, first thing we're going to do is drop our screws in for the receiver, and I'm going to tighten these down. And guys, this is not a difficult process. It just takes a little common sense and a little patience. Okay, now that the receiver rail is tight, we want to take our gators and just loosely set them on the handguard where they would go. And in doing that, we can see what kind of play we have. The two gators should really be mated up perfectly because the handguard is a straight entity that these are tied to. So there should be no issues there. Also, when doing this, you want to go ahead and loosen the tension on your tensioning screws in the handguard, because if you have it pushed one way or another, it may make it difficult to get these to set in properly. So go ahead and do that. And when you set these on here, if you push on this front edge, if you don't have screws in, you can see it's going to tip. That'll throw things off. So you want to take a straight edge and lay it across all this and see how things look. If you don't have a straight edge that'll work, you can flip it upside down on the table and see if there's any gaps. I'm going to use a speed square because this is a straight edge. It'll tell me how things look. When I slide this on here, believe it or not, there's nothing wrong there. I hit because I tipped here, but when I lay this on here, everything lines up beautifully. So my Henry is working perfectly. I don't have to jack this, but I'm doing it to show you guys. I'm really surprised by that. And guys, I forgot to mention, you want to torque your receiver rail to 10 inch-pounds and use some thread locker, of course. Again, as you guys know, I'm not using thread locker on any of this because all this is constantly evolving, constantly changing on the channel. So once you have your receiver rail mounted and you got your two gators on here, you're going to first need to check your alignment down the center line where it's cut out on these rails. So what's going to affect that is 3 locations. You have your tensioning screw at the back of the receiver. That can cant it one way or another. You have your tensioning screw at the tenon, and additionally you have the tenon. If any of those are out of whack, you can push the handguard one way or the other. There's not a lot of adjustment at the back here, but you do have a fair amount of adjustment at the front where the tenon is, and between the tensioning screws and the tenon, you can really push things one way or another too far. And for this setup, you want everything to be true and centered. If anything's off center and it tends to be pushed one way or another more, All you need to do is loosen those tensioning screws on one side, push it to the other side a little bit. If you push from the left, it's going to push to the right. If you push from the right, it's going to push to the left. Simple as that. If you can't get the adjustment needed with the tensioning screws, you may need to adjust your tenon. You may have it shifted too far one way or the other. So just make sure that's pretty much centered before you get started. Once you've adjusted everything laterally with these tensioning screws, that's when you want to use some thread locker and apply 7 inch-pounds of torque to these, and that will help secure everything straight down that line so you have a nice straight line down the center of your rifle. Might take a little bit of time to get things adjusted, but you want to be precise here. If you are going through this process, make sure you get that right because you want that laterally correct. Now, once everything is properly positioned laterally, this is where the height adjustment really comes in, because now that everything is square and true, side to side, now this has to be perfect. And this is the last step in the process. So that's where your straight edge is going to come in handy, and you're going to check and make sure that you don't have anything hitting. And as you can see, mine is dead flat. I'm very fortunate that it works out that way, but if yours doesn't, here's how you fix it. I'm going to go ahead and loosely install all of the mounting screws for these gaiters, and that will allow me to make sure they stay in place, because as you're fiddling around, you can pop them loose since they're not installed. So this will at least hold them down from coming out. I'm not going to completely tighten them down. I'm just getting them close so that I have room to work. I'll check back with you guys in a second after I get all 8 of these installed. Okay, now I've got all 8 screws installed, and as you can see, they won't come off. So our first step is going to be now to lightly install all of the jack screws. So again, I'll come back in a second once I've got all these installed, but they go in the little holes just in front of the mounting screws. Okay, I've got all my jack screws lightly installed, and one thing to keep in mind when doing this process, this front gaiter does not matter right now. It does not matter what it looks like. You are aligning the middle gaiter to the receiver rail. Once you get the middle gaiter aligned with the receiver rail, then this becomes your new 0, and you align the front gaiter with the middle gaiter. If you start aligning this while aligning this, aligning it all to this, you're going to cause yourself a lot of headache and hassle. So just forget this one exists. Take it off the gun if you need to so that you don't mess with it. You're aligning the middle gaiter to the receiver rail. So now I'll show you guys how these things adjust. As I screw this in, if you watch, it will start to lift the gaiter up. And as you can see, a gap is now formed there, and that shows you that I am lifting the gaiter with that jack screw. It jacks it up in the air. So be mindful of the fact that if you turn this one 4 turns, the left side needs to be turned 4 turns. The front doesn't matter because it does, but it doesn't. You need these to be equal so that you're equal at the back. The front may need to jack higher, so this one might be 5 turns on each side, or 4.5, or 4 1/4. But whatever you do to one side, you need to match on the other side. Otherwise, you're going to be canted one way or the other. So make sure you always remember, okay, I did the right one 4 turns. Match that with the left. Once you have jacked or elevated this gaiter to be in line with the receiver rail, the next step is going to be removing your mounting screws one at a time. As you remove them, you want to put thread locker on that particular screw. You want to reinstall it, and when you reinstall it, you want to torque these to 8 inch-pounds. If you torque more than 8 inch-pounds, you risk pushing that gaiter further down in. It's going to compress where that jack screw is hitting in the hole. And as you compress that, you're going to throw this out of alignment. And then you're also going to have the issue of you ran it too far. You're going to have to run the screw down further to accommodate for what you compressed. So bear that in mind. Do this whole gaiter. Once you've tightened all of these to 8 inch-pounds, you can move on to the next gaiter, start the jacking process again to level it with the middle gaiter. Once these are set to the proper depth, then again, remove your mounting screws one at a time, apply thread locker, and torque them to 8 inch-pounds. Everything should be aligned laterally and vertically, and you should be good to go after this. It's not that difficult. It's just a simple process at each location to make sure it's perfect. But again, 99% of you are never going to need to do this. Rule number 1 is looking cool. You bolt these on here, you look cool, you're good to go. They don't need to be perfect. Really, honestly, if you're running a red dot or a regular scope, a white light, anything like that, you're perfectly fine. The only instance I can see where this might be an issue is if you have a heavily drooping barrel and you're running a clip-on thermal in front of a low power variable, something along those lines where you really need that to be aligned properly. I'm very fortunate. My barrel is true and my receiver, everything lines up great. Kudos, Henry, that's an awesome job, but I didn't have to worry about it. But you know, if you do have a heavily drooping barrel, which there are some very heavily drooping barrels out there, and the guns still shoot fine. You know, it's within the company's tolerances, and every company's tolerances vary. So, you know, it's really going to depend on that as well. But that's all there is to it, guys. I hope you found this process to be helpful if you are going to true the system or if you just wanted to learn something. And if you have any questions or comments, drop them below. I'll be sure to get to them when I can. Give us a big thumbs up for a like. Check back often. Have a good one, guys.